so including these welfare costs in the cost of the refugee program, you have to multiply that 1.1 billion by at least a factor of 10 or 15 or even more. The cost of the program is easily in the 15 billion a year when you count the real costs. At this point, I'm more than halfway through my talk, but I found that sometimes it's a little bit long, so I thought I would stop for 5 minutes for questions, and then I've got the rest of my talk, and it's less than half, I promise. So are there any questions?
Yeah, well, hang on, we'll get your microphone. Get your microphone. Let's see. Speak, go ahead.
Yes. My question is, considering all of this analysis, have you checked into the food bank and also the Salvation Army and the resort, because they are also contributing a lot to provide these services for the refugees? Are you aware?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Yeah, they certainly do. And in fact, right, they are. And well, the refugees, as soon as they arrive, they have all the rights and entitlements as a U.S. citizen. So, and in fact, they're encouraged to go to the food banks in some cases. Yes, we know that happens. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Jim.
What's the status of when Governor Abbott told the Obama administration he was not going to allow refugees into Texas? What was the status of that? I know there was pushback from the Obama administration.
Yes, Governor. Oh, yes. Sorry. What is the status of Governor Abbott's statement? Did he say he wasn't going to take Syrian refugees, or he was? He's definitely one of the governors that's more proactive on this issue. Now, the model that he took is the refugee industry is supposed to consult on a regular basis with state officials, and as we know, it's a very highly secretive program. They don't consult. They don't let townspeople know that they're coming in. You just wake up the next morning and there's a refugee office down the street. So basically his approach was, you have not been consulting with us, therefore you're not doing your part of the bargain, so we're going to back out on that basis. I've heard some people say it's already not worked, and that's where that is. But you have Brian Babin's bill, federal bill, which I think has some hope.
There is Babin's bill, which is 3314, which is one of the bills that Act for America is supporting. We will talk about a state refugee and a local refugee resettlement bill that puts some teeth and requires the state or local authorities to do the collection of data. There is a very thin requirement that says the federal government must coordinate or notify local and state authorities.
Right, it's very weakly worded, like you said, a very thin requirement.
Very thin. But
right. And the other state models that states have taken, one is I think Indiana. Mitch Schneider, is he the governor of Indiana, or
Kasich? No, he's in Ohio.
Yeah.
Mike Pence.
Mike Pence, excuse me. Yeah, Mike Pence. He was saying, okay, and by the way, Congress has the power of the purse on this program. They could pull away the funds, and it would be slow. Mike Pence was saying, okay, we're going to take the state portion of Medicaid, and we're not going to pay that. We have control over that. That also didn't fly. Their Attorney General shut it down, and that's not going. The third approach is what Tennessee is doing, which is the 10th Amendment challenge. And by the way, unfortunately, this is not available to Texas at this point. The Thomas More Law Center has promised to take anybody's for free that wants to challenge this program. But they have to have been a state that's already backed out. So 12 states, many of which have already backed out, the contractor just came back in anyway, basically imposing costs on the state taxpayer, using state resources to run a federal program. It's all 10th Amendment issues, red flags all over. So there are 12 states that they have offered free counsel to. So those are the three models that states are taking.
Any other questions? Yes, Dwight, hang on.
You mentioned the vetting process.
I'll get to that a little bit later. I do touch on vetting, but yes.
My question has to do with that, since the United Nations, to a great degree, is controlled by the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Conference. Is it a fair statement that the vetting is essentially a process of the Islamists?
Well, that has been mooted about quite a bit, and it is also a fact that we've been taking mostly Muslims from even conflict areas where Christians have suffered as much or more. We're still taking mostly Muslims. So that would speak to perhaps the influence of the OIC. However, I do have to say, the UN picks them. Our Department of Homeland Security does the vetting as well. First the UN vets them, and then DHS and other entities do vet them. I do feel that vetting is as good as it can be, but of course it's not that good. But it's not just the U.S. has a part in the vetting role, but they don't have much of a part in the picking role, and I do think that is influencing why, for instance, 98% of Syrians from the Syrian crisis so far have been Muslims and not Christians.
Yes, sir. Aaron McKelly. I've been a member of ACT for about 2 years now, but this whole thing sounds like a well thought out, like almost human trafficking thing put on by the federal government. But you were talking about the 8 or 9 organizations that assist in this endeavor. So how difficult is it, or how difficult would it be to have an organization outside that Big Brother type of, I guess, entity to be able to get in, start another organization in here that might be able to track some of the vetting and exactly where these refugees are going, and actually instill some of the American values in accordance with the Constitution?
That's a really good question. And I have to ask, why aren't the organizations that are running it now instilling American values? Why is Catholic Charities not instilling American values? Why is Lutheran Immigration Services and Episcopal Migration Services and so on and so forth? It's all about the money. It really is. It's all about the money. And yes, other organizations occasionally do try to get in because the money is so good, quite frankly. They're not interested in getting the right refugees or instilling American values. There are occasionally other groups do come up, and there probably will be another group because the number of refugees is going up.
Okay, let me address the vetting issue you talked about. The Department of Homeland Security Deputy Director Emmerich said in testimony on the October the 5th, 2015, there are no Syrian records to check in many cases. They can't quantify how many refugees they can check properly. And on October the 21st, 2015, the FBI director said there are 10,000 Syrian refugees can't be vetted properly. And just the other day, the State Department stated very clearly that there were 500,000 persons who were on visas that had overstayed their visas. So the refugee resettlement issue is as a tip of the iceberg, really, of the entire immigration, who's coming into this country.
Definitely. We are approaching European style or size impact.
And that's some of the pieces of data in terms of how many are coming into our country. Just 270,000 alone last year that were from Islamic countries, I believe. And that was from testimony that was given before Congress. It's also in one of our handouts. So again, please encourage you. Don, go ahead and finish up the last portion of the brief.
Now, one thing you'll find interesting from the state standpoint, and that is when the program was introduced in 1980, the federal government promised to reimburse the states for their costs related to social services for 3 years. And again, states have considerable costs in this program. Principal one being 30% of Medicaid. The feds very quickly backtracked on this promise, first reducing it to 18 months, then to 12 months. By 1991, they eliminated that support to the states altogether. In other words, no more support from the feds. So remember that next time they want to expand Medicaid, and the feds say, "Don't worry, we will support your part of the expansion." It was eliminated in about 11 years, back to zero. It's a massive unfunded mandate imposed on states, and the federal government has even acknowledged that it shifted these costs to the individual states. In addition to this, and in another cost shift to the states, direct federal cash assistance and medical assistance for refugees, aside from welfare, because aside from welfare, there is something called RC and RMA, refugee cash and refugee medical assistance. That was also promised for 3 years. Now it's back to just 8 months. Is this a problem? Well, yeah, I would say so, but it's not a problem for the nonprofits. They report, and the mainstream dutifully repeats such absurdities as 90% of the refugees are self-sufficient 8 months after arrival. I guarantee you, I've seen this dozens of times, and you'll see if you look for it, something along those lines. As if there are no long-term demands on social services. The reason why they pick 8 months is because that's when they quit giving out the refugee cash. They actually quit working with the refugees more like 2 or 3 months, at most 4 months. They basically are abandoning them. The trick to some of their claims is how you define terms. For instance, the term self-sufficiency, which is a very important metric in this program, and you'll see it in hundreds of documents. It's meaningless in the context of this program. Officially, by federal definition, refugees can be on all welfare programs except for the cash program, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, TANF it's called. And as long as they're not on TANF, they're considered self-sufficient. In other words, you can be in public housing, receiving Medicaid, on food stamps, getting heat supplements and everything, and you're considered self-sufficient. That's the measurement that they use. Employment is another term which has had its meaning radically altered. Our local contractor was bringing refugees to the day labor lots and calling them employed, giving them part-time work, temporary work, and calling them employed. Talk about shaping the narrative. These groups own the narrative. And why did they make such absurd claims to begin with? Well, because they bid for refugee numbers. They are paid on a per refugee basis. And among their measurements of success is employment rate and self-sufficiency rate and so on and so forth. Hence the outlandish claims and inflated numbers. Let's look at some of the ways that money is made by the contractor.